Okay. Thank you guys for joining me. I am thrilled to be hosting tonight. This actually came about because in the Miss Kyrie Loves community, there was, people sort of saying that me and my husband have completely different parenting styles, or, we're struggling with, yeah, essentially ways to, to parent. Is there any couples on at the moment? Is there any two parents? I know that there's a few people over East. Or there's a number of people over East that couldn't make it so late that said they're going to get a recording. But do we have any mums and dads, or mums and mums, or however it's working in your home on at the moment? Let me know. Oh, beautiful. Yay. That's what I wanted. Okay. Amazing. Awesome. Okay. So to begin with, there's a few things that I'm going to sort of be going into over this time, and essentially, it's going to be talking about early parenthood, this period of time when your little ones are young, managing differences between parents, looking at the controllables, the things that we can control, behavior and boundaries, connection, and then life in general. So, to begin with, I am going to chat about just quickly about who I am and why you should possibly be here and listening to me. So, I am Tara, the gentle sleep specialist. I moved into the sleep space about 9.5 years ago now, and I've worked with families for over 17, coming up to 18 years. So, a long time. I began as a nanny. I nannied for families here in Australia, and I nannied overseas, went to university. And then once I finished, I went into pediatric nursing. That 100% was like my passion. That's what I wanted to do. And my mum is still a pediatric nurse to this day. And so basically, I obviously began with the sleep consulting side of things. And throughout this time, a lot of my toddler work started to it really came to me that so much of getting toddlers sleep sorted was actually looking at parenting behavior, connections, boundaries, the lead up to bedtime. And the sleep issue, that separation part, was really only a small part of it, right? Also, guys, I don't know why I've given myself this background, so I don't know how to do that, but that's okay. Anyway, so basically, it really became important to me to essentially start to really look into that, start to think, okay, well, like, what can we do in terms of the boundaries? But it felt so natural to me to be like, oh, let's change this. Let's do this in the lead up to bedtime. Here's what we're missing. Here's what we needed to add. And then I've just been consolidating since. So doing lots of different courses and lots of different readings, doing the Circle of Security Parenting Facilitator course, to become a parenting facilitator. And then since then, have been working with children up to 10 years of age to basically get bedtimes and sleep sorted. But the most amazing part when I work with families on sleep, especially if bedtimes have become prolonged, painful, having to sit there for your toddlers and children. One of the most amazing parts has been essentially transforming the lead ups, the relationship, the connection, the boundaries, and not just at bedtime, but throughout the entire day, and that sort of thing. So that's really what became so important to me. So I think first of all, when we start talking about getting on top of that, these differences that we might have, how to parent, how to create that connection, it's really important. Firstly, that we acknowledge where we are. And for most of you guys, you will be in the absolute trenches, unless you've got children that are sort of above 4 or 5 and onwards, so upwards from that. You really, if they're 4 and under, you're really in the trenches. Now, as they get older, there's different things that come into play. It's just more worrying. You've got your big worries about big things. But really, I always say these early years are the trenches. And I think it's really important to acknowledge within one another and or for yourself, if you're solo. I've been there, I get it. Really, the time that you are in is really full on, and there really isn't much left for much else, and especially not who you used to be. So we come into parenthood and there's no preparation for it, so to speak. It's basically just here's your baby, and off you go and hope for the best, and do this but don't do that, and do this a little bit but don't do it too much. And it's so overwhelming, and we've got so much access to so many resources now, which can be incredible, and it can also be a really huge a cause of stress and overwhelm and anxiety and confusion, essentially. And so I've always said to people, you need to find the people that you trust and really, the resources that you feel make the most amount of sense to you, feel right to you, don't feel too extreme, and sort of go with that. So acknowledging what has changed is really important, because if we went through a change this big for anything else in our life, people would be like, it would be a big life, event and that sort of thing. But it's kind of like we have this babe, and then we're supposed to find where we are at, find ourselves as now parents, find a relationship as parents. Often we don't acknowledge just how much has changed, how much we change, how much we feel we've lost ourselves, how much we don't really know what is ourselves. And this is for dads and or mums. Guys, I'm going to be using some blanket phrases. Please don't take offense if it's mum, that sort of thing. It's hard to sort of be like, I don't want to be in each sentence being like dad, mum, dad, mum, So yeah, single mum, all of that. But just know that I am really, really, it is listing everyone as a collective, so to speak. And I will make some generalizations about the dad side of things. So what we see in dads and what we see in mums, take or leave it. It might apply to you, it might not, right? But we typically tend to notice certain patterns across both. So it's really important during this time to recognize that you are in the trenches. A lot has changed. And sometimes just taking a moment to choose each other again during this time. Now, my first husband and I separated when we had young children, and we really were in the trenches at that time. And things were really, they were so difficult at that point. Um, I feel like I definitely know that I 100% chose my children over anything else in this world, and I still would. But I definitely can look back now and be like, I know that I gave the relationship very, very little throughout, big parts of this time in the trenches. And I feel it's hard to give the relationship a lot. And I'm sure, plenty of mums could be like, yes, like it's so hard. You're just so at the end of everything by the end of the day. He was FIFO, that sort of thing. Everything is worked out as it was meant to be. But it is important to choose one another again. And there's this period of time where children definitely, they're just going to surpass everything, and they need to, and they deserve that. And we love them and we're selfless and all of that. But just taking moments to choose each other again, I feel is so important. If you are a single mum or are by yourself in any way, then essentially it's choosing yourself again to some degree. And that is really important. And that is important because the best way that I love to look at it is that initially you're the cradle that holds the baby, you two together, and or yourself put together, let's call it, and then eventually you become the roof that holds the children, right? The roof over their head. So the cradle and the roof, and it's together. And so I think it's just really important to take time to choose again. Separation, all of that is really common these days. Often I so often hear of people separating when they do have young children, and there's times where it's absolutely necessary, and then there's other times where I think, oh boy, like you're in the thick of it, just give it a little bit longer, or just make sure you've turned over every stone, right? Because its impacts are felt far and wide and for a very long time. And my children are children who have experienced that, unfortunately and sadly. But they have a beautiful life, and everything that I did from there was like, how do we do this right? How do we make this impact lesser? But it is a huge impact. So it's really important. And the reason I'm talking about this, when I'm like, oh, I only came here to learn how to discipline my child because they're doing my head in. But this is really important because these are the dynamics that play into young children and having young children. So it's important that we acknowledge where you're at, choosing each other again to some degree in small ways, is really important. Staying a team, not sort of, always keeping score of things. Because basically what happens is when you have a baby, mums have never felt so much overwhelm, love, fierceness, need for control, and never had such less amount of control. We always have a joke that our number one clientele are teachers, and that is because they've known when they're going to holiday, they're going to wee and eat, forever. And so, and what time each thing is gonna happen. And so basically when a mum steps into that period of having this baby, they essentially are stepping into this really strong need to try and control again, to keep everything safe. So women are wired for safety. They are wired for safety. It is really, really important to them, right? And what happens is that when you get this most overwhelming sense of love and this most overwhelming sense of like protectiveness and fierceness, we step in and we almost step into that hierarchy, that like masculine role of like controlling and making sure we're over everything. But there comes a time again where dad or partner, be that male or female, needs to come back to some sort of level playing field to some degree. Whereas often it's really hard to get mums to shift out of that space. I am no good shifting out of that space. And it takes a lot, but it's really important to acknowledge that. And I'm going to talk more about that when it comes to gatekeeping and things like that later on. But trying to stay a team as best as you can, acknowledging what's changed and also acknowledging that you are in the trenches, but you won't always be in the trenches. And that is really important to note, that this is a period of time, and for what you can preserve in yourself and in relationship and what you can try and, yeah, literally preserve during this time is important to do so. And then also having an understanding as to where you guys are at, and that it won't always be this way at all. So, I wanted to talk about managing differences between the parents, and I think that's really important. This is going to be a really big generalization between male and female, but you could look at it even if you are in female, whatever relationships you're in, or if you're single. If you meet somebody, this will come up. But you, and even for yourself and the way that you parent, this is really important. And even if I'm talking male and female, there's also like a masculine energy and a feminine energy. And so you'll find even in female relationships, there's a masculine and feminine energy that is at play essentially. So there's one that's, tends to, show certain traits more than the other. So in terms of scripts, the reason why I say this is because what we have to understand when we come into parenthood, what happens is essentially a disc is taken out of our childhood or our parents' head and put into ours. So the things that our parents might have done, the way that we were, the things that we learn, like monkey see, monkey do, that sort of thing, even if they're not consciously coming out, they typically tend to seep a little bit. And you might be like, nope, I'm going to be nothing like my parents, right? But sometimes that's actually what then drives. So, for example, we have parents who really find it hard to hold a boundary, right? Because they're so set on not scripting, they're so set on not doing what their parents did. And so, if they had very authoritative parents, disciplinarians, really hard parents, you're either going to find that they're going to head that way, or they're going to go the opposite, which is, I never want my children to feel the pain that I felt. And I had parents who separated and got back together 2 times before they finally divorced. So 3 fractures in my childhood. So they separated, got back, divorced. They both got remarried again, divorced, both of them. They both got remarried again. So you can imagine I didn't have that stable home. I didn't have any of that growing up. So for me, my script was like, my kids are going to have like their home and, no broken family. And, I never want them to feel that same pain or that same anxiousness. And like, guess what I attracted? And so, I mean, my kids do have that beautiful home, but the thing is that I was so worried about making everything not that way, that it's really hard. And we have to recognize, like, what are the things that we're either running away from? What are the things that we find are the same patterns? And really taking a good look at ourselves and being like, what can I recognize here? On self-reflection. So being like, well, actually, for example, dads often come in with the hard hand, right? Boys don't cry, stop it up, like shut it down, enough's enough, the frustration, that sort of thing. They might smack and think it's totally okay to smack because they were smacked and they're fine, and all the things, right? And so it's really important that we look at these things first and we understand what they are, because it'll give both of you guys a really good understanding of each other. So that is important. Now, what will often happen is that if we have somebody who's really authoritative, disciplinarian, especially if they're heavy handed, that sort of thing, we often find that the other party will go way lenient, like more lenient, right? They'll try and overcompensate for this hard hand over here. The issue with that is that then the hard hand doesn't trust this person to keep a boundary, and this person doesn't trust this person to not get heated, get frustrated, that sort of thing, right? And so we can see how those differences really then impact the dynamic of parenting. And so it's about finding that halfway, because also we're so lost culturally. And I was speaking to clients of mine who are from China. Actually, one was a client, but one was actually a videographer. And we were having the best conversation about the fact that Chinese parents or Malaysian parents, I can't remember exactly where they were from, were so used to being, they would, get a cane across the knuckles if they got the piano wrong, and so much of that punishment and that sort of thing was really quite normal and accepted. But now they're saying that, especially Western, now if they're westernized, it's much harder for them, because they're like, I can't do it that way. So the boundaries are just completely out the window. They don't really know how to come into this halfway. And that's what we're going to find. So when we're managing difference, we have to understand what each other has come from, right? We have to understand what pattern are we seeing in the other person, and are we trying to overcompensate for that? I feel like I need to be softer. I feel like I come in and scoop them up and don't hold the boundary because you're so hard on them, or vice versa. I feel like you're making them be soft, not prepared for life, all those things, right? I don't trust you to hold the boundary. And so therefore, I feel like they need to learn that this is life. They can't get away with everything. It's not all going to be their way. And I need to teach them a lesson and prepare them for life. Dads in particular are very big on the idea of like, they need to be prepped and, ready. And if we don't do it, the world's going to do it, so to speak. And I can tell you, if you don't do it, the world is going to do it. But we can still do it in a really, really supportive and encouraging and actually psychologically like valuable way. So we have to understand that first. We have to understand each other's non-negotiables. For me, my non-negotiable is do not put a hand on my child, right? Now, I'm going to say this, it is never too late. It is never too late to change what we did. It is never too late to change who you are or the way that you used to do things. And you can do that at any moment and know that it is okay. And now we're just moving forward. If you keep looking in your rear vision mirror, like, oh, that time when I did this, and sitting in that shame, it's just going to perpetuate everything, right? So we're going to put shame as best as we can for ourselves to the side, right? Often being stuck in a cycle of shame, or guilt. I feel so guilty. I'm so ashamed of myself. Like, I can't believe I did that. Often it's just a cycle that has played out for a lot of our lives, right? We're going to put that aside. And what we're going to say is, it is never too late. And you're doing your best with what you had, your toolbox of things that you had. You're doing your best with your script. You're doing your best with whatever's happened. We're also doing our best in a world now that is really not helpful to parents. It's really not conducive to healthy parenting and healthy families. In fact, it's kind of going the opposite way, and it's really hard to get it right these days, because everything costs a bundle. Everyone's at work. Everyone's trying to make things happen. There's so much like confusing advice. People are saying go this way. People are saying go this way. It's hard to find really true connections at home, because there's too much. There's too much going on, and we don't have support. We don't have our villages anymore. So it's really important to recognize, guys, that we did our best with the toolbox that we had. We're here now. We're gonna try our best to put what's happened behind. It's never too late, but we're going to discuss our non-negotiables. And my non-negotiable would be, for example, we don't put a hand on a child. For a lot of people, it is also really important that we don't shame our child. So there's a difference between like saying that, or a difference between really making them feel shamed, right? So, shamed would be, for example, I heard a story once, true story, from a grown man whose dad, he said he couldn't get his belt buckle. And the little boy went up and was like, Dad, can I help you with your belt buckle? It was right, obviously at the front of his pants. And the dad was like, what's wrong with you? You gay? Or something like that, or, made a comment like that. And so my best friend's a cop, and he's just driving past with his cop lights on. So there's like shining through the windows. Anyway, so it's really, really important to decide what that is. Okay, moving forward, these are my non-negotiables. If you are somebody who's done the non-negotiables, it's important to say to your partner, for example, I am going to do my best. I commit to this. I'm going to do my best. And this is my non-negotiable. And I want to say that you can also say, like, I might falter at times, or I might step out of that at times, right? But I'm coming straight back into it. I'm coming straight back, to where I want to be as a parent. And it may even take, for both of you individually, whatever it is, to write down some things that you want to change, some things that you want to be your non-negotiables. The next part, so that's sort of focusing, especially on dads, if we find they're really authoritative or they have been physical, definitely can happen for mums too. It might be mum rage, it might be that rage side of things, but then we need to look at like, okay, what is getting us to that point? And so that's when we come into triggers. So whenever I talk about non-negotiables, whenever I talk about these changes, I want you guys to recognize that I completely understand that you didn't just decide to have some mum rage that night, or you didn't just decide to go and, smack your kid that day. However, it's really about looking at what are my triggers? What are the triggers that tend to lead to my parenting being not where I want it to be, right? And also, is there triggers that I can see I'm contributing to my partner's, things at that point, right? Like, so, the whole situation is just, really sort of building to a head. I'm really looking at that together and being like, yup, I can see that my trigger is when I haven't had a moment, I haven't had the best sleep. I can see my triggers are bedtimes, that sort of thing, right? And when you sort of can recognize, okay, these are definitely my triggers, when you know what they are, it is literally about working backwards from there and being like, what can I put in place so that more so I can miss that trigger, right? So for example, Tommy came home today from school and a few of the boys started pushing each other and getting into a scuffle and, all that sort of jazz, right? Recess and lunch for year 3 boys is a nightmare for teachers. I, in fact, can't imagine being a teacher for year 3 or 4 boys because the lunch times and the fights that happen over soccer and football is out of control. Not actually out of control fights, but just the niggling, they're beautiful boys, but just, the things. And so instead of me saying to Tommy, okay, well, what are you going to do about it next time? For me, I was like, what is the trigger? What is it that tends to happen? And he'll be like, somebody's not following the rules or whatever. So then I'll say to him, right, so we know that when this happens, this is how you start to feel at that point, right? And so then I'm like, what can we put in place when you start to feel that so that we can avoid X, Y, and Z? So instead of me just going and being like, I got an email from the teacher today, like, how dare you? I'm giving him a system that he's going to be able to use for the rest of his life of being like, I can recognize something. Like, imagine, guys, if we had this from our own parents. I didn't have it. Like, I've stuffed up a million times in my life. Like, I didn't have it. We're all going to stuff up all the things. But imagine if we can create in our children things that go, hey, let's recognize what actually before that point, instead of me just addressing that moment that he lost his shit or whatever it is, right? If I'm looking at that trigger that happened, imagine if I can then give him a bit of like scaffolding from behind there to be like, when you start to see this, if you start to feel like that it's getting unfair, when you start to see the other boys start to niggle, can you do X, Y, and Z? So equally for myself, if I know that I've got a trigger, it is like, okay, what can I do in this point to make sure that that doesn't happen again? What am I going to tell myself at this point? Can I take a moment at this point? Is it that, what are the things that I'm just not going to allow that make me get to that point? So finding those things out for yourselves is really important. When people think of parenting, they often think of like, how am I going to discipline that child? And I'm getting to that. I am getting to the child, but we have to understand that parenting is actually about you guys and it's about your relationship. It's about the dynamics in the home, and that sort of thing. So really, really important that we look at those triggers, we look at the non-negotiables, and then we get to the mama bear part. Gatekeeping is what I essentially, I don't know if I heard it through an article once, but gatekeeping is what I would explain as when mums step up and never just come down a little bit and play on an equal playing field with their partners. Now, I believe that there are dads in particular and mums, but more likely dads who truly just step out because it's just not for them. They just, prefer the old life and things were a bit easier before and I can't be bothered and that sort of thing. But I also believe that there were very well intended, dedicated dads who couldn't find their place in a home anymore and couldn't find their place in a parenting role anymore. And I believe that and have seen that when they can't be on a playing field or when they feel like every time they're coming in to try and do something and it's done wrong, it's done the wrong way, it's not good enough, it's whatever else it is, right? Then I believe that that causes this, right? And in the end, whatever, you do it. You do it. There's no point trying. You do it. I'm not even getting involved with that. Right. And so work becomes more the priority again, and the headspace is elsewhere and things like that, right? That's what I would call essentially gatekeeping. And essentially I think the term is maternal gatekeeping. And I I would say to a degree, I definitely did it with Scarlett, more so because she was such an unsettled babe. And so here's what I know or understand about it is that mums are trying to just keep everything together, including their own self and sanity. And when you finally get a way of doing something and you're not dying from that way, it's like, please don't touch my way. Please don't do anything that's going to upset this ecosystem because I am just keeping my shit together as it is, right? And so I think there's a middle road. It's important that other partner finds the one who's maybe on the outer, finds really understands firstly where this is coming into play. When we think of safety for women, we're not these days talking about from a lion in a cave back in the old day, but we're wired still the old way. Our brain is wired for safety, right? But safety to a mum these days is I'm keeping afloat. Nothing's going to be too unsettled for the day. I can handle this. I'm not going to lose my mind. I'm not going to get mum rage. Like it is literally just trying to keep everything and everyone afloat pretty much solo a lot of the time, right? Again, big generalizations, right? So that is their sense of safety when they can keep things in control, keep things that is working okay in place. The other partner needs to understand that mum is just literally trying to keep this shit together to some degree. And when they come in like nonchalant and just like, well, I got, it doesn't need to be on that, and not with an understanding of like, it's not actually really coming into play because they feel like, I mean, yeah, there might be that personality type A stuff coming into play. But if you just come in and be like, so how do you do that part? Show me so that I can do it. I want to learn. I want to be able to do that. And it's hard because often we're just like this other party is just like, whatever, I can't be bothered because I can't get a word in, I can't get a breath, and I do it all wrong anyway. So if we can find that middle road between dad being or other partner being genuinely curious and genuinely just a little bit of understanding as to where this party is, it'll really help this party let go a little bit. But this party has to be responsible for letting go a little bit, for understanding that yes, like things work well when babe goes down on time. Beautiful, like all of that. But showing that will essentially show itself when those sorts of things happen. But when we're nitpicking over little things, it's really important to think, is this worth pushing them to step back? Is this worth the things that are going to follow, with it? And I would just say for yourself, for me, I don't sweat the small stuff. So for me, I'm always like, what are the things that mean a lot? Okay, safety. Like, am I going to am I going to gatekeep around safety? Yes. Like if my partner's like, oh, whatever about helmets. Yeah, of course I'm going to be like, no, they need a helmet. Things like that. Sleep, what they're maybe eating, like that sort of thing, right? We're picking those things that really matter. Am I going to nitpick that, like, after they finished using the baby rash cream, they didn't put it back in the section that I did in the section top thing, or, however else it looks, right? Like they fed them with a spoon and it should have been a fork, or, however else it looks. Like, am I coming that halfway to meet each other in the middle is going to be really, really important during this time, right? And also mums realizing that there's probably a lot of good intention there with their partners. And it is important to be like, is this something I really need to be in control of right now? Or is this my anxiety coming into play? Is this my need for control for safety, but actually I am safe and they do have my best interest at heart? And trying to see like the good inside each other and trying to really understand each other during this time. Like guys, other partner, if you can actually see like This person is desperate for some safety, for some security, for something to be controllable, because everything feels a bit out of control. And I've never loved something so much in my whole life, and nothing can go wrong with this little love of mine that I would literally lay down my life for without even thinking. Like, if we can essentially see that that's where they're coming from, and other partners to be like, they probably really want to step back up to here, if not here, like they're so used to being like, the person who provides and having that, and then they've just gone like right down here. And so if we can see that, hey, like they probably want to feel that. I'm just going to generalize here, but men love to feel needed. They love that. They love being that is what they're like. They are caregivers. They are the people who want to step up and provide and that sort of thing. For the most part, huge generalization, I know. I definitely know there are some men and or women. It can be all different, but men who aren't in that position as well. But that's just essentially the way that I want you got. That's an opening for a discussion that you can have with your partner. Well, and a safe space after this, be that straight after this, where you're like, is that how you feel? Like, or no, is that how you feel? And being like, I feel like this. I feel like this. Not like, well, when you do this, the control is a big thing, but the stepping up. So, and then also making sure that the partner is that, consistent in that stepping up as well. What are the controllables that we can have for our children that really help with boundaries, connection, all of that sort of thing? Sleep. Sleep is so important. If you are struggling with sleep, I will transform your life and your bedtimes. And I am telling you, it is very hard to have a healthy family dynamic and a healthy relationship and a mum who's not struggling with rage or just struggling or whatever else when sleep by toddlerhood is still rubbish. So I am telling you, you need to really, really do what it takes. And I'm not just saying this from sleep consultant. I don't mind if you use somebody else, like whatever it needs to happen, that you genuinely go, sleep has to be a priority for us. That's why I put it up the top. I don't sell myself. I'm not here to sell myself. I put this on for free because I genuinely feel like I want to impact families, because children and kids and babies are the absolute loves of my life, not just mine, but in general. But I can tell you that it is very hard to have family system that is working harmoniously and the ecosystem being really great when sleep is shitty or bedtimes are a nightmare. Change it. Let's change it. It is absolutely a controllable. It is absolutely a necessity when it comes to toddlerhood. Now, if you're co-sleeping with your little one and you're sleeping all beautifully, I'm not telling you to change that. I'm saying when sleep is really difficult, if your bedtimes are a nightmare, it is something that you can make changes to. It is something that you must prioritize, because a healthy ecosystem in a home is really hard. And it's sometimes by the time you've gotten to ages of sleep deprivation, it is only after you get it sorted that you go, like, this is me. And that's my child. Like I was like, now I look back, I'm like, I was so short. I mean, like, I'm just giving examples. I was so sure of, whatever it was, right? Like I thought I had postnatal depression or anxiety, like, and yet there might have been parts in there, but like, now I'm sleeping better, like everything, yourself feeling like yourself again, like being able to have the motivation to, to work out again, like whatever it is, like these things are really important. And health, immunity, especially at daycare, things like that. It's just so, so important. So please keep an eye on that for yourselves and consider that. Outdoor time is what your children need so much of. Play and outdoors. I cannot stress it enough. With the sleep thing with children, often parents don't even know how like not amazing, because they know they're amazing, but well behaved, or like how much behavior or pushback or tantrums or big emotions were actually attributed to being way too tired. It is such a big game changer. Outdoors play, it is the number one learning tool for children. It is so important. We have lost a lot of it, and it is at a detriment to children. I can't stress it enough. I really can't stress it enough. It'll not only build up their circadian rhythm ready for sleep, help with the hormones that are producing for nighttime hormones and sleep, but in so many facets. Think of children literally as little beings that need all of that out. They need all of that energy out. And it is so, so amazing the difference between a child who's had a day of play as a child who's had a day of screens, for example, or no sunlight and things like that. Nutrition and hydration. Hydration is so important, whatever you can do, but that's sort of self-explanatory. Screens and overscheduling. This is my next biggie that I'm going to talk about. So when it comes to screens and overscheduling, it is really, really important to recognize the impact that screens are having on our children. I'm not here to bash parents for using screens. You guys, most of you, if you follow me, you know my feelings on screens, but I can't stress how important it is that you honestly realize how detrimental that screens are. They have a significant, we're not talking like 0.1%, we're talking 10% for every hour impacts a children's outcome for attention disorders. It is huge. We're talking in the tens of percents per hour. It's really impactful for children when it comes to ADHD. Things like, we've actually had so many children who come through, or a number, parents like, I think they're on the spectrum, we're getting them tested, and with sleep and no screens, they were off that. Now, that's not to say those diagnoses and things don't exist. Of course they do, but it is so impactful when it comes to your children. And the best way that I can explain screens when it comes to behavior, children are supposed to be letting out all the scents, let's call it. You're putting a lid on top. All the energy is supposed to come out. You're putting a lid on top when they're on screens. Half an hour, you can imagine all that energy that's building up. Remember, emotion is energy in motion, right? It is meant to be out. You take the screens off, turn the screen off, so you're releasing all of that and it all comes out. Their behaviors, the issue, meltdowns, big emotions, feeling, because it's all been not only bottled up, but we know that screens, essentially the way that they make them addictive and the way that they keep children watching them is by constant changing of scenes, constant scene changes, things crashing, something coming in, new sound, dung, dung, dung. You'll see it now that we've spoken about it. That is like the brain is just constantly like wired, stimulated. You turn the TV off and it's like their brain is still like on the treadmill, right? And so that is when you get like the absolute behavioral issues. You might see it right then, you might see it across a period of time. If you're having issues with your children's behavior in any way, shape, or form, and they have more than 30 to 45 minutes of screens a day, you must address it. It feels like it's going to be a long way around. It is not. You're on the long cycle at the moment if you've got screens involved in a big, big way. Okay, I can promise you that much. It is so amazing to see children transform when screens are reduced, if not gone. And overscheduling, which is a biggie to talk about because we are in this like lifestyle now where there's so much on, and then we need all the sports, and then we need all the other things, and we've working till this time, and then we've got daycare, and then we've got, all these commitments. And we really often, with all of these things together, when they're not in line, we essentially don't get to see the true version of what our toddler, our problematic, three-nager, terrible twos would actually be like, right? Because when they have enough ability to move, to feel, to experience, to explore, to play, to create, to use wonder, imagination, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, problem solving, critical thinking, all of those things are held in when they're on screens, and also many of them are stopped when we overschedule. So trying to make time where, you know what, we actually have a free day, let's not fill it. We have a free afternoon, we have a free 2 hours. Make it bloody boring and make it boring together. Really, really important to consider that for our little ones, because transition points are really hard for toddlers in general. And because we have so many transition points in our day-to-day life, it's really tricky. If you guys think about the way that our brains were made, they were made to be like in a space, for example, like in the wherever woods, whatever it is, with a cave, around our community of people, and children just played around, and, they were exploring, they were expending that energy. And that is the way that the brain is wired to function. It's not wired to function the way that we all are functioning at the moment. Boundaries are a form of love. They are a part of love. They are important. Of course, love and nurturing and all of that comes first, but boundaries are a part of your love language to your child. And I want you to remember me saying that, because without boundaries, what is left is chaos. If you feel that you are taking the easy way around in parenting, often, if you feel like you're taking the quick fix, the passive, just to appease or things like that, I want you to know that you're taking the really freaking long way, and you might not get there straight away, but you're getting to the really long way around. And it might not come out straight away that you've gone the long way, and you might think you're on the detour and it just cuts a little corner here and there, but you're essentially way off track. Okay. It's never too late, and nothing is to shame, right? That's, I want you guys to remember that here. But it's really, really important to keep that in mind, right? So to really look at, okay, so if you're so when we talk about boundaries and things like that, when you can first come to terms with the fact that we can understand that, well, boundaries are a form of kindness to my little one because they actually really need it. Because when you imagine a child's brain, it's disorganized in lots of different ways, right? And they need help to organize it. They need help to put everything back in filing things and to work out how the systems work and to work out what's expected, what to do, what not to do, because they're testing and pushing, right? They're pushing here. Oh, oh no, that's a boundary. Okay, we got that one. And oh, the boundary's gone. Oh, And so when you think of it like that, like I'm just overseeing and just being like, okay, like this is good. Okay, yeah, no, we're not doing that. That sort of thing. Yeah, we can do that. What we're helping our little one's brain do is to essentially be able to like organize itself, to be able to find that sense of security in things, that sense of certainty in things. And certainty and security and all those things are exactly what make the brain thrive and make little ones thrive, right? And so in order to hold boundary, we must connect before we direct. So some things that I love the idea of when it comes to connecting before directing is, again, not overscheduling too much where possible. But if you have busy days, I get it, just finding saturation points. So I can have 10 minutes here, because sometimes even when we're with our kids all day, like sometimes you can get to the end of the day and be like, I didn't even like sit and like look at them. Like I didn't even know if I showed like, when was the last time I sat down and was like, what are you doing? What are you playing with? Or, whatever it might be. Or they might be in your face like the whole time. But it's like at which point was I like, hey, you, what do you want to do? Like, what's going on? Like, oh, let me see this. Like, just that, like, because what will happen often is that our toddlers, especially if we are busy, we're in our own heads, all of that, they'll seek. So they'll be the ones like coming constantly to us. Whereas sometimes when we engage them first, we show them that engagement, we connect with them before we ask something of them, it is so helpful. So when you're thinking of bedtime routines or things like that, instead of like saying from the other room when we haven't had that connection time, like, oi, Johnny, come and like brush your teeth, get your pajamas on, that sort of thing. What we want to do is go in and see what they're doing first or engage with them first and then be like, do you think that after we finish doing this, we can go brush your teeth or, let's go do this next or that sort of thing, right? So it's about meeting them somewhere, finding little spots of saturation, being like, do you know what, when my partner gets in the door, for example, at 6, from 6 till the kids go to bed at 7:30 or 7, whatever it is, let's have no screens around. Let's make sure that our phones are away completely so our little ones know that we are just there. We're just being with them. Let's not worry about making sure everything's spotless after dinner because we've only got an hour with them from daycare. Let's find that time to connect, even for 10 minutes or swapping in and out with each other. But just having those moments of connection time, especially where you can be physically connected, so you can lay on the floor with them, you can roll around with them, you get to look at them in the eyes, you have a good conversation at dinner, that sort of thing is going to help so much when it comes to boundaries. So connection is high. When connection is high, resistance is low. That's really, really important. You want to bring them on side first. Really important. We're going to consider those controllable factors that we spoke about. We're going to look at who's the driver, who's driving the car. Basically, what happens is that when you constantly feel the need to shut a tantrum down or to make sure your little one doesn't lose it or to appease or to make your little one happy or whatever it is, what I want you to know is that for as many boundaries that you don't hold and they get to essentially push and the door open, so there's that saying, toddlers push doors they don't want to open, the more that that happens, the more that your toddlers essentially feel that they are in control. They're like, oh, like I'm running the show here. And this is so common when it comes to the lead up to bedtime. And parents are often like, they're totally running the show. And sometimes parents don't even realize until I'm like, but why can't dad brush their teeth? Oh, because only mum can. Oh, okay. Why did you do 7 books? Oh, because they wanted more. Like it can just be the smallest things, right? And when we come in from the outside and look at it, we're like, oh, they're totally in control, right? So it might not be at that point, it might be at any point, right? But it's really important to look at, am I the leader? Am I the sturdy, kind leader that my child needs? Or are they the ones that are now leading the show because I've just let my boundaries lax and they can't trust me to drive the car? Right? They need to step into that place of the controller, telling everyone how it is, running the show, whatever else, because our boundaries have just been lax, or, mum and dad just don't have it. They're not on the same page with these boundaries. So the child essentially is like, I'm just going to bypass you two and I'm going to take control. And so looking at, well, who is the driver and how can we step back to being really kind and sturdy leaders that our children need? it feels really horrible for them when they are in charge and leading things. And guess what? They feel the need to do even more when something feels unsafe. Control it even more, which is why the requests start, which is why the meltdown starts, the behavior starts. It's all too much. So when you hold a boundary, I want you to think of like that as being like, I am your sturdy leader, babe. Like, I've got this, even though they might not feel that, their experience of the emotions and the feelings will be disappointing or upsetting or whatever else. Now, if you're going to try and take some control back of your toddler's, behavioral periods of, bedtime, whatever it is, your children have to learn that they can trust you. If you are inconsistent, if you let them essentially just like you try for a second, they're like, oh, whatever, or they can't trust your ability to not be triggered or to keep it together while you're trying to take back over the car. Like, is anyone going to let, somebody who's like raging in the background, like be like, yeah, you seem like a sensible driver? No. When they feel like you're a sturdy leader, you've got this, I'm the driver of the car now, babe. I know it's going to upset you initially because it feels really shitty that you're losing that control that you gained that sense of safety from, right? I've got this. They need to be able to trust that you're going to hold the boundary and that you know what you're doing in that space. So being the driver again is really important, and there's going to be a tug of war when you try and get that back, right? Being together with your partner, if you have a partner on the same page, is going to make that way easier for your child. So just consider that if you guys are like, after this, we're going to put some things in place. Now, that doesn't mean you come in all like boundary full on stupid stuff. It means that, hey, when it's bedtime, when it's these things that are the important things, here's the boundary. We've already had our books. I can see this is turning into a shit show because you're leading, as in child's leading. Now we're going to come in, now we're going to make some changes to this area, and not sweating the small stuff in between, right? It doesn't mean we're just going to be picking on everything because we need total control. That's ego. That's different. We don't need that. So as in, we're not going to get into that. We're going to be like, I'm not going to even get into the power struggles. So, basically I'm like, I'm such a sturdy leader that I'm not even going to power struggle with you over the little things because I'm good. I've got this. I don't need to prove to you that I told you and you listened to me and like I won that little power struggle over something that was really not important. So essentially, when you are stepping back into that driver's seat, what I want you guys to look at is when you hold a boundary with your toddlers or children, it is important not to stay focused on the boundary. So, for example, if your toddler says, but I want another milk, I want my bottle, and you're like, you're 4, you don't need a bottle anymore. And your toddler's like, I want the bottle. When you guys have decided together that the bottle's going, for example, this could be anything. I want the TV back on. And you're like, no, the TV is off. We've had our 40 minutes in the day. With TV, guys, make sure your children know when that's happening, preferably in the morning, like not straight away when they wake, because they'll wake earlier for it. But, they might have it in the morning. They know that's their time and it goes off after that. Beautiful. Don't leave it unknown because they'll keep focusing on it. But when you know that that's the time, it goes on and off at these times, for example, or at that point in the day, amazing. Then when that boundary stays when you've put that boundary in place, it could be any boundary. The next thing is, instead of focusing them on the boundary itself, so being like, well, the TV this and the TV that, like, let it go. The boundary's there. We don't need to get into a power struggle about, well, you said, back and forward. No, we're not entering into the power struggle. It doesn't mean it's passive parenting though, because whilst we're not going to be then disciplining and being like, how dare you get angry at me? Instead of that, what we're going to do, instead of focusing on the boundary itself, we're going to move our child to experience the feelings, name those feelings. So for example, I know you feel really disappointed that the TV is off. I know that you're angry that, or you're sad that you want your bottle, for example. I know it feels like a really overwhelming thing to let go of your bottle. Or I know that you've been saying, we've been doing 12 books at night, but we are changed, because you can make changes, parents. Just because you've set them up a certain way, yeah, it kind of sucks. You feel bad, like, oh boy, I feel bad because they've had this for so long, and now we are doing 15 books, or now, they're so used to more screens, and I feel bad taking their iPad off them. I gave them an iPad at 3, and now I'm going to take it off them. Like, you can change your mind at any point, and it is actually your obligation when you know better to do better, right? As that parent, and being like, this isn't working for us, babe, like this isn't working for us as a family. So I'm going to make this change, and it's going to feel really shitty at the time, but I know it's what's best for us as a family. How powerful is that thinking? I know that I know that we were doing one thing, but now we're doing something else. And I know that's going to feel like this, sad, disappointing, whatever else, but I can see what's best for us, and it's not that, right? And so that can be applied to anything that you're doing. But then what we want to do, again, we're bringing them back to the feeling of getting those feelings out. Now, if your children are like, I hate you, like, you don't need to be chasing them down. What? What did you say to me? Like, there's no point. Let them get it out. Yeah, we all stay stuck when we're in that moment. Children can say, like, they can have their big feelings and, like, I don't even want to be here, whatever it is that they're going to say at that point, right? I didn't even want to be with you, poo poo bumhead. Whatever it is that they're talking about, they're allowed to have those big feelings. They're allowed to get their feelings out. They're allowed to cry over their feelings. Other partner in particular, they are allowed to cry over silly stuff. They are allowed to get all their feelings out without being shamed. What's wrong with you? What are you crying about? Without the looks, without the oh, you're a joke. Like all of that. They don't need that. What they need is to understand that all of their feelings are welcome, not all behaviors, but all of their feelings are welcome out, especially when we're now also working on the fact that we're connecting with them more, we're having some saturated time with them, we've got the outside times, we're in control of the controllables, because we can't just expect that a child should change their behavior when we haven't supported that in like to encourage or enable them to change or to enable that transition to be easier for them, right? If you've got a screen on for 3 hours or 2 hours before bedtime, and then you're like, there's such a nightmare at bedtime. Well, no wonder. You've put all the other hormones in place to keep them up. It's kept all the energy inside and given them a massive second wind. Their brain's been like the whole time that the screen, then we turn them on, then we're like, they're so naughty at bedtime, right? So we have to do our part. Our part is to make sure that we've connected. Our part is to make sure we're looking at, okay, what are our non-negotiables? I am not going to hit my child or whatever it might be, right? Our part is to control the controllables. Our part is to make sure that when we come into this space, we are like, I'm here, I'm your sturdy leader, I can hold space for you. I have been in situations before with partners where I have been like really upset about things. Something's happened, I've been so upset. And the best thing that person can do is just be like, I get it. Like your emotions are just so like valid. You're so like, I mean, I don't know that anyone actually ever says that. But imagine teaching a child the skill of being able to get out their feelings, process those feelings, right? It'll become healthier processing. As they get older, they'll learn to like be able to regulate well. Don't worry that if you let them get their feelings out, well, are they just going to be weirdos that like burst their stuff out at school and things like that? Social pressure will take its place in that respect. But you must allow for them to experience and feel their feelings at home to get them out, because what stays, like what lingers or what stays inside, festers. We don't want it in. Everything is welcome out except for behaviors. Now, behaviors, you could essentially, if they're trying to hit you, you can physically stop them. You can move them away from the rest of the family. If things are getting out of control in front of siblings, you can sort of lessen their space, but still be with them, but put a boundary in place. I will remove myself from this room if you keep kicking at me or whatever it is. If you're going to buy whatever it is that, maybe I am going to move myself away because that is my boundary. That is what I'm telling you I am going to do for myself as a boundary. It is not the scorning looks because your boy is crying over something that you think is ridiculous or, that sort of thing, right? That just creates angry men. Okay, what we want them to do, what we want our boys, what we want our girls to do is be able to get those feelings out without being shamed or without the looks or, that sort of thing. And guys, like we're not always going to get it wrong. And that's when we get to go back and repair afterwards. I'm sorry I lost my cool before. Not, but if you just didn't do this, it is, I am taking responsibility for the way I behaved. And I'm going to show you how you do that, because eventually your child will become a healthy adult that says, I am sorry for what I did in that part. Like, I'm sorry for my part in that. And that's what creates healthy relationships as they get older. That is what creates healthy people who can express their feelings, people who can essentially learn healthy ways of regulating, but they can't regulate when it's all pushed down. That's when it causes issues. So whilst you might think, well, smacking works or, well, shouting works or whatever else, all it is this. Shoving it all in. And that'll come out later on in other ways. So we want to make sure the lid's off. They can get it out. They're in a safe space to get it out. If you need a moment, take a moment. If you need to, like, if you stuff it up, it's okay. Rupture and repair is what it's called. It's okay if you need to go back and be like, babe, like, ugh, I don't know that I handle that the best. I'm trying to. I'm human too. I feel like the feelings that you feel too. And sometimes too, children just want to be like understood that it is disappointing and it sucks. And that sort of thing. So bringing them into that feeling or that emotion and letting them get that part out is going to be a really big part in how you then manage that period of time. Now, once they get through the feeling part, which will get easier and easier as they realize that you are holding boundaries well for them, it'll be way less. So the parents will worry at first, what are they just always going to have these huge bloody meltdowns because we're letting all of our feelings out? Like, this is crazy. But I hope I still look like I've got a top on. But what we want to remember is that it's just at the beginning, these you'll get a lot more of these feelings while you're holding the boundaries, because that sense of uneasiness, you're taking back the control. And once they realize that they're safe in your boundaries, honestly, it is so good. It is so much bloody easier to live life that way. So when you think this little 2-minute thing of chucking them on the screen, saying yes, we're just to get them off to bed, every time you think that, I want you to remember me saying it's a detour that leads you to the completely other country or whatever you want to call it. So really important to keep that in mind. And then essentially, once we've moved them through that emotion part of things, we've allowed that out. No, about the behaviors though is very different. That's when we're either like holding them. If we're like, no, like holding them, I will not allow you to hit me. I'm going to remove myself from this room. But also making sure that if they are upset, you can essentially be with them, because I can tell you one thing: when children are upset, they're not thinking what you're doing. They're often thinking, I'm bad. Right? I suck. I've done this again. I'm broken. I'm this, I'm that. I don't like myself. Why do I do this? And so we don't want to leave them alone in that. We want them to understand that them having those big feelings is really understandable, because we used to be able to do this and now we can't and it sucks, or because it's really hard for our little brains to be able to, essentially our prefrontal, like you can't explain that to them, but you might sort of say, this is just learning, sweetie. Like as you get older, you'll feel better. These emotions, you'll still feel them, but you'll be able to handle them better, depending on the age, right? You can say, I know you feel really big feelings and they might feel frustrating. And guys, to be honest, most of the time our children are just as fucking frightened of their own feelings as what we are of them, and or we're probably less. So when they're in those big feelings and they just seem like nothing cares to them and they're just out of control and they're really angry and we're like looking at them like, what in God's earth is this? Please know that they are just as mortified. So when you look at them like, what is wrong with you? Or whatever else. Now, guys, we've all been there. Please, again, move past the guilt. We're not in guilt. We're not in shame. We're moving forward. We know these things and we need to practice, and these things are going to happen. But when you can be with your child and be like, it's okay that you have those big feelings. I won't let you scream at your sister, so that's why we have to move away, or I won't let you hit me, for example, or things like that. But I love you. There's nothing wrong with you. I have these big feelings too, and I'm an adult who's just learned to manage them. So those sorts of things are going to be so, so important for you guys to keep in mind, that you want to be with your child in these periods of time, to just make sure that the self-talk that they're telling themselves when they do feel broken, when they do feel overwhelmed, isn't the story that's going to be on repeat for a long time ahead. So then if there's something that we need to address, we address it, right? So today, when I addressed it with Tommy about what had happened at school, and I gave him a little framework and what we can do to move forward, he was very aware at the end of that with my words of, but it is unacceptable to put our hands or feet on people, and we will not do it. And I will not accept that you will do that. You're a good kid and you're a kind kid, but I will not accept that we put our hands on people. And so I'd recircle back to the boundary that is in place, to what I expect of them, to things that could have been different, to next time we could do this, to let's put this in place, because that is how we create healthy adults, right? It's not the traditional ways. But again, we're not passive parents because the boundary stayed in place. That important boundary stayed in place. And that's where we don't just turn to the whole like super gentle parenting where you can't upset a child and crying causes cortisol. Babies, kids are meant to cry. Now, of course, they're meant to be loved and they're not meant to cry because of abuse or neglect, but they're meant to get feelings out. It is really important that we don't be too scared of those feelings, right? Connection is now, this is going to be my last big thing to talk about, is the missing piece for many families these days because we are dual incomes. We're so busy. There's so many pressures. A lot of mums and dads have lost themselves. There's no time for us to do something ourselves. There's a lot of societal pressure on being everything and nothing to ourselves, and showing that nothing is hard and we've got everything, and we're not only business owners, but we also make amazing food, and then we also do some, we also do that. But I can't stress enough how pivotal your connection with your children are, not only now, but obviously ongoing. And I know everyone knows that, but I'm talking about a true connection. I'm talking about the type where you look at them in the eyes again. I'm talking about the type where you're not scrolling your phone when you feed your babies, for example, for the most part, right? I know life goes on. I'm talking about the part where your child feels like during the day, for parts of it at least, they're more important than your phone, for example. I'm talking about when you get home from work, it's the things are away until they're in bedtime because they've only just come home from daycare and we need to have some time together as a family. I'm talking about the type of connection that means that we sit at the table and we look at each other and we talk where we can, or just finding moments, the type of connection where we feel each other again, getting to know our little ones' love language as they get a bit older. So, for example, I thought Tommy's was physical touch. Tommy's is actually time. So, how gorgeous. So now I'm more like, okay, well, let's do something to get, like, let's play some sport together. Rather, before I'd be like, if I haven't felt like that, I'd connected with him, I'd be really inclined to just like grab him and cuddle him and smooch him and all of that. And I'm like, really wasn't that. Like I thought that that was it. So just getting to know like what it is that you feel really fills my daughter's is words. She's a words of affirmation by far. And so obviously your little ones might be a bit younger, but really starting to know like what is it that they're looking for? The seeking. I want to seek you out. I want to see what you're playing with. I want to get interested in you and what you're doing. I want to engage you to play a game with me. Imagine going up to your child and being like, hey, bud, can we go play a game together? Like, oh, just that joy, that feeling for them. Like when your partner comes up to you and is just like, come here, I miss you, like whatever it is, right? Like that seeking to be sought after, right? What we have now is this huge thing, and it's called peer raised children. And basically, because of the way that we're set up to find with parenting, that's really tricky, um, is that children are starting in care and to be around a significant mass of peers, so children their age, way earlier than what they ever were before. So when you think about old days, it's like there was so many. It used to take 6 men in a village to raise one child. Like 6 men were dedicated to the raising of one child from 6 years and above. Before that, it was the women of the village that all raised that one child. Wild, right? And now it's just us. And now also we know the things that we can do right and wrong because we've got so much more like experience with psychology and things like that now. So it's it's a lot. And so, what I want you guys to remember is that traditionally, it wasn't like, oh, babies need to go to daycare because they need to socialize. It is that foundationally, what's really important is that our children have elder good role models and older people who are a part of their life. And it can be friends, it can be family, it can just be you and your partner, it could just be you. And if you can pull some, friends, families, like people you genuinely trust, and obviously in safe situations, but as much older people company that you can have, and as much as you can keep that connection, it is really important because what's happening is that children, so when you think about children, they need an attachment. Think about a duckling that's just been born and it attaches to the dog, right? Children, their primary source is I need to attach to something to stay alive, basically, right? So attached to us, we go back to work, they go into daycare, for example. Now, I'm not bashing daycare here. It's a part of life. There's no question about that. However, there are things that we can do to buffer this peer raised children, because what happens is that the reason why so many parents are struggling with parenting older kids or kids as they get older is because they've lost the attachment with that child. They've lost that primary connection. Now, when they start in daycare as young, it's often not the caregiver in that daycare, the instructor is often not, they don't have the time always because there's 6 other kids that they've got to care for. So children turn to children. And so what we talk about is that children are raising children, and we do not want that, because here's the thing. What you can give your children over their peers is so pivotal. Unconditional love, acceptance, understanding, validation, knowing them deeply and intrinsically and loving them anyway, holding boundaries, upsetting them if you need to for their better, understanding life, having more life experience, being able to, see beyond the things, right? But what's happening now is that children are raising children from a young age because they're their primary. They're getting home, they're not getting back reattached. So there's this thing called collecting our children. When your children get home from daycare, when they get in from school, it is reattaching and reaffirming that you are their person and that you guys have that attachment, that bond, that, that connection and time together. That is so, so important because you need to re-mother, you need to like re-father, like re-get them back in so that you can keep raising them. If we just like, oh, it's easier if they're off with their friends and that sort of thing, and I get it, I bloody get it. But if you're at family barbecues and things like that, try and get the kids involved in cricket with you guys. Try and get the adults to mingle and to the kids to come and talk, with you guys, rather than it just always being peers. We need to recollect our children because then we keep the authority. Now, without authority, connection, and attachment, it is very hard to hold boundaries. And the thing is, with peer raised children, especially as they're getting older, if parents are very not present and, home might be really hard or things like that, when children try and find attachment instead of all of that unconditional love and all of those good things, the one thing that they search for is likeness, not liking, but like a likeness. So being like one another. And you better hope that your children choose the right peers, right? We don't want to bank on that because then you've got no authority, no control. Basically, when you can keep reforming this attachment, reforming that connection, collecting them after they finish, having dinners together, rituals, having the Sunday roast, having a walk on Sunday morning together, a bike ride, whatever it is that you can do, that you just literally put in little things, a thing that you do before bedtime, a thing that you do when you say goodbye, a picture that stays in there, like whatever that you can do to keep ahead of the peers is really freaking important. So connection is not only important for boundaries because you cannot you have to connect to direct, right? It makes it so much easier. You also need to have an attachment to be able to be an authority figure in your little ones' lives, right? That's why we sort of say, like, when step parents come in, they can't just come in like a bull in a china shop and expect that the child's going to listen to them and do what they say. They don't have the attachment. That's why it works. That's why there's often so much strain between step parents. So Anthony really had to like absolutely create this relationship with my children before. And even now, like, he won't be the one who will be like, the authoritative. He might sort of back me up every now and then and be like, guys, your mum's asked, 3 times, like whatever it is. But it is so important that we keep collecting, keep after school we collect, because especially if they're then in OSH club and then they're in date, all of this stuff, we can see, right, how our children, instead of this time that was like past tense, like really primarily adult, like caregiver, and especially like if mum was home and dad was, out hunting, all the things, we can see now how it's a very different lifestyle. And the risk of that is peer raised children. And we don't want that because guess what? When peers turn their back on children, instead of it just being a bit of a like, oh, it is like it is different. And that's why that's like, there's this guy called Gabor Mate, I think his name is, I need to find it out. But he talks about why, teenage suicide and why teenage, depression and things like that is so strong. And a big part of that is the fact that when a child is then rejected from their attachment, their primary source, how devastating it actually is when they bully them, when they turn on them, when they exclude them, or that sort of thing, because that's essentially like their parents doing it to them, right? Because that's become their primary attachment. So it's so important to keep creating rituals, keep finding points of connection. It doesn't matter about, if you can't, you've got to work. I get it, by all means, but just finding little points of saturation because it will make then your ability to hold a boundary, to be an authority figure, to influence your child just so much more. And so much more impactful. And we want that. We really don't want children raising children. So that's really important. So yeah, that's it. It's a lot. It's a lot, but I know that, if you guys just keep thinking in your mind, it's never too late. I can take and choose the things that I think she makes sense on, or the things that I really feel are important. Then please do that. Please do that and know that, it is all a learning thing. I only know all of this because of the position I am in. I would not know this if I wasn't in that position. I would have repeated a heap of things. So yeah, that's really important. If you guys have any feedback, like, please let me know. Please let me know. I would just love to hear what you thought about tonight. And the things that resonated, the things maybe that you need clarifying. Please feel free to email me. It's info@gentlesleep.com.au. Only if you loved it, please feel free to leave a Google review. I'm just playing. Well, I'm not playing. I'd love that if you loved it. But please, guys, please give me feedback. Let me know if you've got questions, that sort of thing. Lizzie, let me have a look. It's totally okay, Lizzie. Completely, absolutely okay. Totally. Awesome. All right, I'm going to stop recording. I'm going to stay on for a sec just in case there's any questions, and we will go from there.